forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace, joined, of course, by co-host and just all-around swell dude, Aaron McIntyre. We are heading into the second half of the college football season. Aaron, already college basketball is about 2.5 weeks away. Are you ready to go?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this is the most wonderful time of the year, especially if you're a professional sports fan. But, we've got Major League Baseball going on right now. We have the NBA going on right now as well. We also have, college football, NFL, all of that going on right now. It's always a good time this time of the year because there's always these 2.5 weeks where all of these sports are in gear at the same time.
Amen. So let's get to it. Right off the bat here, it's our big 5 of topics to address this week on Bigger Ten. Let's start with your beloved Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa. What you doing? What was that out there on Saturday? Losing by 17 to Purdue. The spread was only off by a swing of 30 points. Iowa about 12.5 point favorite. Lost the game by 17. Number 2 in the country, now outside the top 10. 4 interceptions for Spencer Petras. So now Iowa knows what it feels like to be all the teams Iowa's played prior to last week. Phenomenal performance by Purdue, particularly David Bell. At this point, Kirk Ferentz is on the phone looking. I mean, Iowa's got a bye week. He's spending some of that time helping David Bell find an agent for the NFL draft. Iowa fan has seen enough, as is Iowa player, coach, water boy, administrator, cheerleader. Everybody associated with Iowa football has seen enough of David Bell the last 3 years as he owned the Hawkeyes again. But it wasn't just that. Iowa struggled in pass pro, struggled to generate any pass rush, struggled to generate any offense whatsoever. Lost by 17, but only gave up 24 points. That's really not a big number in today's college football, but I think we saw. I mean, Purdue's defense is not terrible, but it is still a team with 3 defensive coordinators. I mean, it's probably a top 40, 50 defense in the country. And so they're decent, but you saw Iowa unable to generate any offense whatsoever without the defense creating momentum via turnovers and short fields. And I think that makes this seem not fluky, and I'd be a little concerned about maybe feeling exposed a little bit as a Hawkeye fan. What say you, Aaron?
So I would say the first thing is, Purdue, and this game is no exception, under Jeff Brom has really had Iowa's number. Their offensive scheme, very similar, I would say somewhat similar to Northwestern's offensive scheme in terms of where they like to attack defenses that play a lot of zone, which Iowa likes to play. That's why Northwestern has given Iowa fits offensively over the year, no pun intended. And that's why Purdue, under Jeff Brom, has given Iowa a lot of fits over the last 5 years as well, because they exploit the flats and the soft spots in between the zones. And then, of course, when you're Purdue, you have a little bit higher caliber of an offensive player at most positions, whether it's David Bell or whether it's Rondale Moore a few years ago, and that just gives Iowa a lot of defensive problems, even when their defense is overall a really good unit, as we've seen earlier this year. So hats off to them. I will say the one time under Jeff Brom, again, Iowa is 1-4 now against Jeff Brom coached Purdue. Iowa squeaked by 2-3 years ago. I think they got a 5-point win at home against Jeff Brom when they were favored, I think, by 10 or 11 points, just like they were this time. Mm-hmm. Who was playing on the defensive line at Iowa at that time? That would be A.J. Epineza, one of the best defensive ends Iowa has seen in a long, long time, playing that position, able to get enough of a push off the edge. So, hats off to Purdue. Not only have they given Iowa fits just schematically, coming off a big win. These are still 18 to 23-year-old young men. It's just really, really difficult, as we've said a lot of time, to get up week after week emotionally. And I think you caught them at the right time. Still a really bad loss, though, as you said, for Iowa. Still a really bad loss. And for the Penn State fans watching right now, Daddy just showed you how to respond to a loss like an actual adult. So I hope you're taking notes.
I love the fact you can tell that the graphics for this show are presented by an Iowa fan. We're going with the graphic "Life is Pain."
Is
I like
it not?
that.
Is it not, though?
Do you think, and hey, every team doesn't want to turn the ball over, right? But we have a proof of concept now that if you don't beat yourself, the Iowa offense may not be able to move the ball across the street. I mean, if you look at the rest of Iowa's schedule, you could make an argument that that's the worst defense they're going to face the rest of the season. And I mean, Northwestern's defense is not bad. It's just, their offense isn't any good. Maybe Purdue's defense because of the presence of a Karlaftis, who's an NFL guy, obviously. Maybe they're a little bit ahead. Okay. But you could at least make the argument that's the worst defense Iowa's facing the rest of the season. And now teams know, we don't have to take chances. We don't have to. We don't have to be the team that, allows Iowa to lure it into the kill box here. So we're the ones that panic and feel like we've got to get aggressive. We turn the ball over, give them a short field, and we lose. Are you worried about a proof of concept here, I guess is what I'm trying to say about how to beat Iowa in 2021?
Not really, no. Because Iowa's offense actually was moving the ball a little bit. I mean, that first drive, they were moving the ball down the field. They got near the red zone if they weren't in the red zone. Turnover, They were moving the ball, somewhat efficiently on the ground as well. It missed field goal later on. And then you're down by 2 scores and you're not playing your game. You're not playing your game at all. You look at the turning point of the game, and that was that gift fumble into the pylon that, I can't remember. Forgive me, Purdue's secondary wide receiver just gave Iowa the ball with a touchback. 3 plays later, minus 10 yards. This offensive line for Iowa is really not up to snuff, at least by Iowa standards, for this point in the year. I have to think, though, that they are going to improve, at least take some step forward. Spencer Petras, you mentioned he has had 4 interceptions. One of those was when the game was still in doubt. Sure. So I'm really not. Iowa has had clunkers like this coming off of big wins before. Remember back in 2018 when they just knocked the socks off of Ohio State, went up to Madison. They scored, I think, 1 offensive touchdown. Or I'm not even sure. No. They didn't even score an offensive touchdown. They had 14 points in that game thanks to the cornerback for the Hawkeyes getting 2 pick sixes in one game. So they've had these clunkers before. I have to think that they'll bounce back from this. Of course, if you don't want to find yourselves in a really tight spot with Iowa, don't turn it over. But in terms of the rest of the season, I'm not nearly as worried as I've seen some.
Understood. All right. Well, let's get to a broader look then at the Big Ten West, because it does suddenly seem more wide open. I mean, Iowa was the number 2 team in the country last week. This week, Minnesota controls its own destiny. That's a Minnesota. Do you know who's playing running back for Minnesota right now? I mean, they're just grabbing people out of the stands. Hey, man, you look like you're, 3 abs short of a 6-pack. Let's give you a shot. Tanner Morgan has played 1 good half of football all year, and it was the first half against Nebraska. We'll talk about them in a minute. Second half, he was brutal again. I mean, he has played 1 good half of football the entire season. They are down to, I think they're down to Chico's bail bonds at tailback. You couldn't name like 3 defensive players on their team, and Minnesota controls its own destiny in the West. Because remember, they won at Purdue 2 weeks ago, right before the bye. Suddenly, Wisconsin looks back alive again, and Iowa's got to go to Madison in a couple of weeks. We'll know a lot more about Wisconsin after they go to Purdue. And who thought at the beginning of the year, when Wisconsin and Purdue hooked up, Wisconsin would be unranked and Purdue would be in the top 25. You throw in Nebraska, who all the analytics love. They're considered a top 25 team in all the advanced analytics, but they just invent new ways to lose. Again, we'll talk more about the Huskers here in just a few minutes, but this division suddenly looks a little wide open.
Yeah, I don't think so, actually, because I don't really buy that. I mean, Iowa, it's those games that they played, those 6 wins in a row to start this season, they still happened. Okay, this was I still think the Purdue game, it was not good.
You don't think Purdue will go 8-1 in the Big Ten?
I don't think that Purdue is going to go 8-1.
Okay.
I could
just clarify.
Would it shock you? Would it shock you if Wisconsin rolled into West Lafayette and won?
No,
this
they're
weekend?
actually favored.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Would it shock you if Iowa, playing Wisconsin for once when Wisconsin doesn't have a bye and Iowa does have a bye, would it shock you if offensively Wisconsin can't move the ball against Iowa and Iowa ekes out a 10-9 win up in Madison?
No, in fact, I'm probably going to be betting on that.
And
if the total is anything over 17, I'm betting the under.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Minnesota has to play Iowa in Kinnick. Now, granted, they're due for a win against Iowa at some point. I don't really see paths for the other main three teams because Purdue, that was a great win against Iowa. I don't really think they're as good as they looked on Saturday. So I don't really see a path, an easy path for any of the three teams we just discussed.
Go. Aaron still demonstrating that it is still true. The only thing more confident than an Iowa fan after a big win is an Iowa fan after a big loss. All right, so let's get to it.
I mean,
I should not have done that. That was a bit of a cheap shot. I'm sorry. My bad.
3-1 in the division. Those games still happen.
No, the point that you made, those first 6 games, when a lot of them, it was driven by turnovers, but in the scoring column, they were still dominating a lot of those games. You're right. Those games did still happen. I agree with that. Yes. And hey, I'm not running out to cash a Purdue 8-1 to win the Big Ten West ticket right about now either, or Minnesota for that matter. All right, we've teased this a couple of times. Let's go to Nebraska, and I have to tell you, if I want to go back in the DeLorean. There's a lot of things I want to go back in the DeLorean and tell myself from 2016 and 2017 that I won't believe are true that are going on right now. I want to go tell my 1997 self that the time will come I'll feel some sympathy for Nebraska. Right? Michigan and Nebraska splitting the championship, Scott Frost running his mouth. But here we are. I guess it's just because as I get older and I just, you have people and friends you have, or even just listeners, followers, et cetera, that, live and die with these teams. And if it's not your team, you feel their pain, okay? Watching that Nebraska, and guys, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. I have seen every Detroit Lions game since 1983. What does that mean? What does that have to do with this conversation? What it means is I know of every conceivable way to lose a football game. That's what it means. Like I root for the franchise who only exists to clarify obscure NFL rules. Right? I know how to lose games. I know what it looks like. Even by my calloused Detroit Lions stained hands, Aaron. Watching Nebraska. Minnesota in the second half last week on at least 3 occasions literally walked up to Nebraska and said,
Here you go.
You can have this. And they just refused to take it. Man, if you're a long-term Husker fan and you remember the years of winning 9 games or more every year for like 30 years in a row or something, I don't even know how you're handling this, right? Because you were born into a world where this was inconceivable, and we are using the right context of that word there. By the way, Princess Bride. This is incredible to watch. And you just start thinking, and I tweeted this on our Bigger 10 account at the end of the game on Saturday where they suffered yet another 1-score loss. I believe the Huskers are now, 5-18 in 1-score games or something like that under Scott Frost. It just seems to me like they just need a reboot. Like there's just, at this point, there's been too much, some relationships, it's just that there's been too many things that have happened to you guys. There's so much baggage that the two of you share that, and neither might be the other's fault that you inflicted on the other. It's just bad stuff that happened to you while you were together that you just can't recover from it. You know what I'm saying? It's just like when you guys get together, that toxicity just multiplies. And I just think maybe Nebraska needs to just move on and just start again and reboot again, because they just look like a team that just sits, and I see this, again, as a Lions fan, Aaron, they just look like a team that just sits around and waits for the bad stuff to happen to it.
Man, that's dark. That is so dark. But it's true.
Doesn't mean it's not true,
no,
right?
Yeah. I tend to agree. Trust time there is waning very rapidly. If you listen closely, listen. That's the sound of an NCAA investigation.
Indeed.
Popping up again. His time there is all but done in my view. What really got me after that game in particular was that video you retweeted on the Bigger Ten Twitter account.
The PJ Fleck one.
PJ Fleck.
So Adrian Martinez, classy move, by the way.
Yeah, taking Adrian Martinez aside.
Yeah.
Who knows what was being said there, but you kind of realize you never really saw Scott Frost do something like that to any of those guys. Instead,
that's the point.
Instead, it's, this unit made a mistake, and, I can't help it when our guys are doing this. And it's always pointing the finger, blaming. Meanwhile, Adrian Martinez, despite the fact that, there are a lot of things that, there are a lot of turnovers that have been on him, he's still giving it all out there. I mean, you can see that every Saturday. He's putting his body on the line every single Saturday.
The whole team is. They're playing their asses off pretty much every week.
Yeah, and in the end, it's the opposing coach that's going over there and having a few words.
That's a great point, man. Yeah.
Oh man,
I felt like hugging Adrian Martinez after our Saturday night game against them a couple of weeks. I was ecstatic we won, but I've just seen that happen to that young man, so I felt like running up and giving the kid a hug.
Yep.
You know,
it is sad and it's kind of dark, but I hope they'll be able to hit the reset button, and I can't wait to talk. I have an idea for a head coaching option that we'll talk about at the end of the show.
Okay. Yeah, I've got one too, which they'll hate, but I think it's absolutely the best move they could make. Speaking of head coaching options, current betting favorite to be the next coach at LSU. Do you know who it is?
Again?
Plus 200 is Mel Tucker, the Michigan State coach.
Wow. Mentioned
prominently by Bruce Feldman at The Athletic. And I'll tell you right now, Bruce Feldman is as connected with the coaching carousel as any media member in the country is. And there is some history here. LSU has gone north to East Lansing and taken away its head coach once before. You might recall his name was Nick
Saban?
Yes, Nick Saban. Yes. So we saw Mel Tucker leave Colorado after 1 year. I think LSU is the best job in the country. And if it's not, it's in the top. It's low. The lowest is top 3. There's no in-state. You're talking per capita. Arguably the most talented state, not named Georgia, for high school talent in the country. There is no other rival. You don't have the other California schools. USC's a top 5 job. That's open. And we've already talked about the fact James Franklin's considered the favorite for that gig. Wouldn't it be something if Franklin and Mel Tucker both got these top 2 jobs in the country? But could LSU poach Michigan State's head coach, who, of course, has an extensive background in the SEC, was an assistant for Nick Saban at LSU? What do you think, Aaron?
Hats off again to Mel Tucker this year. It was surprising to see him after a season at Colorado where he didn't really prove anything to go and see Michigan State hire him. Obviously having a great year this year, but these are all guys that, by and large, he hasn't really developed yet. So I think, the credit file, one of the first times you apply for a loan, I'm not sure if we can give it to you. Your file's really thin. I don't know about you. I mean, this year notwithstanding, the file on Mel Tucker is still pretty thin. It really surprises me that LSU ostensibly has some interest in him. But as you said, there's a history here between those two schools and poaching coaches. So I guess anything is possible. I mean, Mel Tucker, as I understand, he's more known for his defensive prowess. So LSU, I think, is really thirsty for that right now. So we'll see what happens.
The defense at LSU has imploded for the second season in a row under two different defensive coordinators. You want to talk about coaching carousels, though? We've got 2 absolute dead nuts, not even debatable, top 5 jobs in the sport are open right now at USC and LSU. And if Franklin takes one of those jobs, because he's considered a candidate for LSU as well, and remember, he has been a head coach in the SEC for Vanderbilt, we could have a top 10 job at Penn State open. It's conceivable that you could see the Raiders with Jim Harbaugh ascendant. They tried to stop him from taking the Michigan job 7 years ago, remember? And now the Raider job is open. Could you see the Raiders go after a Jim Harbaugh? And depending on his family situation, there was a lot of talk last year that his wife and kids wanted out of Michigan and wanted to go back west. I mean, could you imagine a coaching carousel where USC, LSU, Penn State, and Michigan, 4 top 10, 12 jobs in the sport, 3 of the top 4, 5, 6 historical blue bloods of all time, those jobs all can potentially come open. And of course, then whoever they hire, there's ramifications, right? Because then like Michigan State would come open in the Mel Tucker scenario. This could be like the greatest coaching carousel potentially of all time, Aaron.
Yeah,
like a 30 for 30 kind of stuff.
I'm not sure if Jim Harbaugh really has things humming at Michigan. Do you really want to start over again if you're a Michigan fan, especially if you end up playing a 12th game this year and winning that 12th game against Ohio State?
No,
is
continuity
it really great?
is the best thing to keep if you can do it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's not really a great thing for the lead for the league, I should say. It'd be entertaining to see how it plays out, but I'm not really sure how I feel about this from a Big Ten perspective. If Mel Tucker is a 6-0 type of coach that he seems to be right now with a team that he has, you don't really want him bolting to the SEC. You don't want anybody bolting to the SEC or anywhere else. So I'm not really sure what to think about that. I don't really like those prospects for the Big Ten, but yeah, that would be one heck of an off season to keep track of from a coaching carousel standpoint.
Since we are at the midseason, let's dole out some midseason awards. Now, these are mine, and you are welcome to agree or disagree. For Coach of the Year, of course, I have the aforementioned Mel Tucker. I mean, their opening win total was 3, then closed at 4.5 before the start of the year. They're the first team in the FBS to get to 7-0. So, yeah, that's Coach of the Year stuff. Offensive, with 40 new players, by the way. Offensive Player of the Year, let's go back to that well again with Kenneth Walker. Who could be a Heisman Trophy candidate right now if we were doing the voting this week. He's been phenomenal. I think he's gone over 1,000 yards already for the season. Defensive Player of the Year, I think there's several candidates for this, but just on a down-to-down basis, I don't know that anybody's been more dominant than Aiden Hutchinson. But I mean, I looked at your Riley Moss, for example, and you really felt the loss of him in the Purdue game as a result, because that really made it that now the other receiver gets to go off too, right? You can't, at least in the other game, David Bell can't catch every damn pass that Purdue throws. But now if you don't have Riley Moss, they can spray the ball all over the field. So that would be a name to consider. There's several names on the defensive side we could choose in the Big Ten. You have any big differences with who I have here for my midseason award winners?
Nope. Michigan State came out of nowhere. That usually warrants a Coach of the Year award. I would say to this point, Kenneth Walker has been the most consistently good offensive player in the year, and I don't think it's even close. Aiden Hutchinson, yeah, I think maybe it's a little bit closer there, but when you look at what he's done, obviously that's an easy pick. I do have one award to dole out. It is MVP of the league, and it's Iowa punter Tory Taylor. Steve, your thoughts?
Dude, this league, and it's just so on brand for the Big Ten, it's freaking loaded with punters, man. Michigan's punter's great. Rutgers punter is great. Iowa's punter is great. That's as on brand for the Big Ten as you can get. This league is actually like, it could have like the first and second team All-American punters.
Yep.
Could come from our conference. All right, let me throw this crazy scenario at you. What is more likely to happen? Scott Frost, Jim Harbaugh, James Franklin, Mel Tucker are all back. Or Bill O'Brien is coaching at Nebraska or Michigan State. The former Penn State coach is the Alabama OC now. Matt Campbell's at Michigan.
I can already tell you it's the latter.
You think it's the latter, that we could see these jobs all come open?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, folks, let me tell you about DraftKings. If you are an NFL fan hungry for a big win this week, DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL, and it's got you covered. New customers, you can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game, and if they do, You win $200 in free bets. So you want to bet $5 this week on the Arizona Cardinals to beat the undefeated team in the league, to beat the Houston Texans. You're going to win $200 in free bets on that game. That's some winner chicken dinner right there with DraftKings, which gives you safe, secure, reliable sports gaming. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use the promo code BIGGER10 to bet just $5 on any NFL team to win, and you'll win $200 in free bets with the promo code BIGGER10 at DraftKings, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, wants help, call the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Gambling Disorder Helpline at 800-270-7117, 21 and older, Michigan only. Eligibility restrictions apply, and you can see DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. All right, let's get after it with our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, would you rather have 3 quarterbacks or 3 defensive coordinators? Because Purdue has both. And they're ranked in the top 25.
Yeah.
They've got 3 quarterbacks and 3 defensive coordinators. Which of those 2 things would you... Maybe Jeff Brom needs to be Big Ten Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
On a serious note, I think we have been reminded that there was a point in time not too long ago. He was considered the best play caller in our league. And he kind of reminded us of that last Saturday. But which of those 2 things would you rather have?
So I would rather have the 3 defensive coordinators. I mean, the quarterback position is the best, is the most important, I should say, position on any football field, especially in the college level. And if you want to just deploy the 3 quarterback strategy for one game to whatever Purdue's strategy was, keep Iowa's defense off balance, what have you, I think that's fine. I think you're cruising for a bruising though if this is kind of your staple. I really, what would we say in any other scenario? Well, there's 3 guys who are really kind of vying for the job here. You'd say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks.
Right.
If you have 3 quarterbacks, you have -1 quarter, probably. I mean, with that logic. So I think you're cruising for a bruising here if this is a long-term strategy. Might eat my words about that, but there's a reason why this is not more common. Isn't there? There's a reason why.
I would think maybe next year we'll have somebody with 4 defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah. This one is for
one
you.
for every quarter of the game. You take turns calling the signals. There you go.
There you go. Would you rather have Iowa's offensive line or Wisconsin's quarterback?
Oh gosh, Aaron, that is some. Gosh.
Because this is what the West might come down to.
In the midst of this show, Aaron has said life is pain. Totally dismissed, though, the idea that the Big Ten West is open. And then reverted back to, would you rather have the worst starting quarterback in the Big Ten or Iowa's offensive line? Isn't being a fan great?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the cavalcade
you can hold all
of
these,
whimsy and emotions,
well,
yes.
No, you can hold all of these. I mean, I've made pretty good cases for all of this. You can hold all of these positions
Sure,
at the
you
same
can.
time.
It's a little schizophrenic, but you're right. You could, yes. I'd rather have Iowa's offensive line. I watched a lot of Wisconsin and Army on Saturday night.
Dude.
And Graham Mertz, guys.
Army had the ball with like 3 minutes to go with a chance to win.
And it's pretty clear that Paul Christ got the call from the bat phone at Barry Alvarez and said, take the damn ball out of that kid's hands. They're just going to run those. They've only got 2 running backs now because of COVID and suspensions and everything else. They're both pretty good, but they're going to just run those guys into the ground. And I just don't see a ceiling there. I just don't. Not this season. I'm not going to write a kid off as highly recruited as he is, this early in his career. But this season, I just don't see a ceiling there. At least Iowa, I've got an All-American anchor at center to start building from. I don't know what I'm building from with Graham Mertz. I don't. So I'm going to take Iowa's offensive line.
All right.
All right. For you, one more. Would you rather the Raiders came after Jim Harbaugh so you could go after Matt Campbell, or stick with Jim Harbaugh and the continuity within the program?
This is impossible to answer at this point with any degree of well-foundedness at this point in the season. But I would say I would err on the side of continuity right now with Jim Harbaugh. Last year, throw that out. As a fan, unless you're a fan of a blue blood, but the rest of us peons out here, the rest of us in the serfdom who don't root for
his team was ranked second in the country.
Blue bloods. Yeah.
Life is
See here, but that makes sense though, because we dropped out of the top 10. I mean, they considered us.
There you go. That's how you play the victim card. That's well done.
That's why
now you're behind a team you just beat the previous week in Penn State.
I had to listen to the announcers crap all over Iowa's resume, pull for Purdue to win that game.
Yes,
all day on Saturday. So yes,
that's only a slight exaggeration, by the way.
Forgive me if I overstate Iowa's case here. The rest of us in the serfdom, the supposed serfdom of college football, we just want to have the opportunity to take our smooth stones. Now, of course, if you're a blue blood, you expect to beat Ohio State. You expect to be vying for college football playoffs and things like that. Jim Harbaugh has gotten Michigan in the place where they at least have that opportunity most seasons under his watch. So I would say stick with the continuity.
Okay.
This final one is for you. Would you rather bet Penn State minus 24 against Illinois or Wisconsin minus 3 against Purdue?
I think I'd actually rather bet Wisconsin minus 3. I don't think Sean Clifford's going to play. Now, I think, what is it, Taquan Robinson, is that the backup there at Penn State? He's not a highly recruited player. This is not a guy that was thought of as a clear heir apparent to Sean Clifford. But he's also, though, a recruitable athlete at one of the top 10 historical blue bloods in the history of the sport, right? So you have to assume he's better than what we saw against Iowa, where he got thrust into an impossible situation with one of the best crowd atmospheres we're going to see all season anywhere in this sport. The game's on the line. They already were struggling from a snap count perspective. And he didn't get like any reps at all that week because you're going to play Sean Clifford or prep Sean Clifford as best you can for a game against top 5 teams, right? So he's better than that, because what we saw in Kinnick doesn't get a scholarship to a school like Penn State. Fair?
Yeah.
I just don't know how much better he is than that to be laying 24 points. It's also a massive look-ahead spot with Ohio State coming up the next week. Okay? So I think I'd still rather bet Wisconsin minus 3, because that's basically a toss-up in a series that they've kind of controlled, if you put a gun to my head. I'd rather go with a toss-up in that case, and the greatness of Wisconsin's defense, than worrying about where the quarterback is. And then a number like that, let's say he plays great and it's like 35-7 or something in the third quarter. James Franklin, man's emptying the friggin' bench. We're not getting anybody hurt between now and Ohio State, right? Next thing you know, Illinois throws up some kind of garbage time touchdown. It's 35-14. You got the cover, right?
Yep.
So there you go. All right, we'll come back with our feedback of the week and Twitter poll results next. This week's Twitter poll results. We asked you, who is coaching Nebraska next season? Now, 47.7% of you said it is somebody else on this list. 35% of you said Scott Frost. 8.7% of you said Hugh Freeze. Now, why did I pick that number or that name? Because that was the name that I predicted in my crystal ball in my college football preview, the Liberty former Ole Miss coach. And then, 8.6% of you said Bill O'Brien, who helped rescue Penn State post Sandusky, then went off to the NFL, that he would return to the Big Ten and coach the Huskers. All right, so, but obviously the overwhelming supermajority thinks it's Scott Frost or somebody else. Now, I have a sincere suggestion, Aaron, for Trev Alberts, the new AD there at Nebraska, which I think he should take but never will. But since you called dibs on this, I'm going to let you go first. You have one too.
Well, I'll just begin by saying Bill O'Brien or Hugh Freeze. Those would be great hires, I think. I think Hugh Freeze would intrigue me a little bit more than Bill O'Brien, but I think both of them, I think you would see some better results within a couple, 2-3 years than maybe what we've ever gotten with Scott Frost so far. I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm really not. Why don't you go after Bo Pelini? Get him to come back. He's the last one that had some modicum of success within your program. Go see what he's up to. See if he can coach you all again. He knows the state. He knows the area. He knows the team. See if he'd be willing to come back.
Here's who I think they should hire. I don't think that's a terrible idea. I don't think it'll ever happen.
Nope.
But I don't think it's a terrible idea. In all sincerity, what I think, this is the problem Nebraska has to me more than anything. Well, twofold. And I think this actually addresses both of them. One is a loss of the cultural identity of the program. the walk-on program, the physicality, those things just aren't there and haven't been for a long time. I think what I'm about to suggest addresses that. Secondly is recruiting. Nebraska is in a no man's land right now. It's just not as attractive. Frost tried to open up the West Coast portal, and so many of those guys left, transferred, moved on, had issues. They can't recruit Texas as well as they did in the Big 12 because they're not in the Big 12 anymore. They're not really, if you follow recruiting in our league, they're no factor in Ohio or Illinois or Pennsylvania, which are the main states in our footprint. They're not any factor in those states recruiting. I don't even hear about them a lot in New Jersey and the DMZ. So to me, I think Nebraska, frankly, I think needs a gimmick. Something that sets it apart. I'd go hire Jeff Monken, the Army coach, and I would run the triple option. Because how many championships did they win? How many national championships did they win running the triple option well into the late 1990s? And you can adapt it for more of a passing impact if you want. But with Monken and Army, he will bring the physicality. You know that. Culturally, dude, that state would freaking love that guy. Yep. Love him. All right, he's a perfect fit. And now you've got a gimmick. Here's why that gimmick matters. Because there's a lot of 5'9" and 5'10" quarterbacks in Texas and Florida that just are never getting recruited to play quarterback in the Big 10, Big 12, SEC, at any of these other systems because of their size. But they could come and play in the triple option and play quarterback for you. And now you're getting a different level of athlete. You're difficult to prepare for on a week-to-week basis. To me, it helps you on the defensive end because now you're playing more ball control at the exact same time. So you're limiting possessions. I think that would be a dynamite hire. I think he'd freaking absolutely kill it. And it would give Nebraska a level of distinctiveness that now it's one man's distinctiveness is another man's remote outpost. Right now, they're a remote outpost. They don't have a recruiting base. And so they have to take chances on kids from talent-rich areas, and it takes away from the cultural heritage and identity of the program. Bring in Jeff Monken, go back to the triple option, and start cutting teams, blocking the hell out of him, being nasty, physical, disliked. I don't know, man. I mean, tell me what's wrong with that other than your pride.
Oh no, I think this is the same case you've made for other Big Ten teams when they have head coach openings. Make something distinctive.
Yeah.
That you're never going to be able. Here's the unfortunate reality for the have-nots, if you want to use that ridiculous term or phrase that's bandied about. The serfdom, as I said earlier, of college football. You're never, ever going to consistently beat the big teams. You're never, ever going to consistently beat SEC caliber teams by trying to beat them at their own game. You're just not, because you can't recruit at their level. So find something that makes you different. Find something that makes you actually have to make your opponent think about you for more than 2 seconds, and then go out and you do that. Because, I mean, for every time an Iowa or Purdue knocks off a number 3 or a number 2, respectively, Ohio State, they're getting their behinds handed to them by 2, 3+ touchdowns every single week, every time they play a team like that. So, do something that makes you distinctive. There's not, you brought this up. I think you brought this up last year after Illinois had a coaching vacancy.
I thought Kansas should have hired Jeff Monken and gone triple option
as well.
Yep.
Illinois, maybe not that great of a fit culturally. Kansas, or especially Nebraska, with the resources that Nebraska has, that's an even better fit.
Let's get to the feedback of the week. And it's from Dane Schiltz, who says, the bigger question is, does it really matter? No West team is any good. Winning the Big Ten West is only an invite to a beatdown, probably to Ohio State. Winning the West isn't exactly marketing material this year. So that's from Go Back. His handle is Go Black and Gold 82. So it sounds like he also believes life is pain this week. It's abandon hope, all ye who enter. It doesn't even matter if we win the West now. Now it is true that no Big Ten West team has won the Big Ten championship game, but is it as bleak there as Dane Schultz believes that it currently is? It doesn't even matter if you win the West.
No. Have you seen that much of a difference? Have you seen like light years of a difference in terms of strength of victory, or just the overall style of play from the East against the West this year? No, everybody's on Ohio State. You should be, because they recruit incredibly well. You should expect a lot from them. But their big victories over the last 2-3 weeks have been Maryland and Rutgers. I haven't really seen a heck of a lot to inspire a lot of confidence in a drubbing, what was the word, beat down by any of the teams in the East this year. Sorry, I just don't. Regardless of whether it's Iowa or somebody else coming out of the West. So
I can't answer this question. Michigan's never even been to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, so I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it feels like, and I can't believe I just said that. But it's actually true. But it is. I'm gonna go cut myself now. That'll be it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, multiply, divide, share, follow, what have you, depending on the platform you're on, whether that is iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or right here on YouTube. Help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like yourself. Follow us on Twitter as well, @Bigger10. Until next time, right here on Bigger 10, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace.